Macmillan Audio presents The Immortality Key, The Secret History of the Religion with No Name. Written and read by Brian C. Muraresku. Foreword written and read by Graham Hancock. Preface by Michael Pollan. I date the start of today's psychedelic renaissance to the year 2006, when Roland Griffiths and his team at Johns Hopkins published a landmark study in the Journal of Psychopharmacology with the intriguing title, Psilocybin Can Occasion Mystical Type Experiences Having Substantial and Sustained Personal Meaning and Spiritual Significance. The researchers reported that 2/3 of the volunteers given a high dose of psilocybin had a profoundly meaningful mystical type experience that led to lasting improvements in their well-being. The 2006 study launched dozens of others as researchers began testing the potential of psilocybin to treat a range of mental disorders, from depression and anxiety to addiction and obsessive-compulsive disorder. Psychedelic research had headed down the path of science, and specifically, the path of psychiatric drug development, with striking results. It is expected that within the next few years, certain psychedelics like psilocybin will be approved as drugs by the FDA. But there was a second, very different path of inquiry that Griffith's 2006 study pointed to that might have been pursued instead, the path suggested by the phrase mystical type experience. To the discomfort of some scientists, Griffith's paper dwelled on the distinctly spiritual nature of his subject's experience, one that was indistinguishable from the sort of transformative mystical experiences chronicled in the history and literature of religion. Few picked up on them at the time, but Griffiths and his colleagues were dropping some interesting crumbs, leading anyone who might want to follow them in the direction not of science or medicine, but deep into the history of religion. The crumbs came in the form of questions. Are humans hardwired for mystical experience, and if so, why? If a high dose of psilocybin can occasion the sort of profound visions and mystical experiences that have inspired religions, might psychedelic compounds have played a pivotal and unappreciated role in the birth and practice of certain religions? And if this is indeed the case, why have these extraordinary facts been suppressed for thousands of years? The reason we speak in terms of a renaissance of psychedelics is that most of today's research represents a revival of work begun in the 1950s and 60s, and then abandoned after the moral panic that engulfed psychedelics after 1965 or so. This goes for not only the medical research, but also for the research on religion and culture more generally. Albert Hofmann, the Swiss chemist who discovered LSD in 1938, came to believe that a related psychedelic compound was used by the ancient Greeks in the Eleusinian Mysteries, the secretive ritual that lasted for some 2,000 years, and counted among its celebrants many of the leading lights of Greece and later Rome, including Plato, Cicero, and Marcus Aurelius. This potion, called the Kykeon, allowed those who consumed it to travel to the underworld to commune with ancestors and preview the afterlife. Working with R. Gordon Wasson, the banker and amateur mycologist who discovered the ceremonial use of psilocybin among the Mazatec in Oaxaca in 1955, and a young classicist named Carl Ruck, Hofmann sought to identify the psychedelic compound used at Eleusis. Other scholars, such as John Allegro, argued that psychedelic compounds played a role in the development of early Christianity. The case for these theories was compelling, to be sure, but never more than circumstantial and speculative. The early researchers failed to find convincing evidence for their extraordinary claims. With The Immortality Key, Brian Muraresku has picked up and followed these provocative lines of inquiry, in the process advancing the story of psychedelics and religion to the point where it must be taken seriously. The book takes the form of a detective story, setting out to answer a fascinating series of questions, using a set of tools and documents that were unavailable to Ruck and his colleagues in the 1970s. What was the chemical in the Kykeon? What about the drink consumed in the rituals of Dionysus and Bacchus? The classical texts speak about the transformative power of wine, yet the Greeks had no word for alcohol, and some...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?